Another one of those findings in Database Health Monitor that you may come across is high VLF count. And what does this mean? What exactly is high VLF count? Well, in SQL Server, you have your log file and you have your data file. Data file is managed with one set of rules. Your log file has a whole different algorithm on how it's being managed. And your log file is where transaction logs are being kept. And this changes a little bit whether you're in simple or full recovery model, but if you're either way, whether you're simple or full, your log file is still broken up into smaller pieces that are called virtual log files, or smaller chunks that are VLFs, virtual log files. Now, you can have a lot of these that are really small chunks, or you can have a few of them that are really large chunks. And it really depends on how your auto growth settings are set as your file grows. So let's say you set up something like one of our not recommended settings would be like 1 megabyte file growth. Well, on your log file. Well, as that log file grows, it's going to grow at 1 megabyte at a time. And if you grow to like a gig or a couple gigs in size, you can have tons and tons and tons of little chunks of log file that are all allocated separately called virtual logs or virtual log files. Our recommendation is that one, you adjust your file growth settings appropriately so they grow in a little bit bigger chunks than that. But over time, you may get to the point that your file has grown and you still end up with too many virtual logs. So our recommendation when you get to that point is to shrink your log file, even if it needs to be that big, shrink it as small as you possibly can, and then expand it back out to that full size in a few different chunks. What that does is it makes it so, let's say you ended up with 1,000 or 10,000 or more than that virtual log files. By shrinking it, you eliminate all those, and by growing it back in larger chunks, you end up at the point that you have the same size log file in the end, but fewer virtual log files. Now, how many is too many and how many is too few? Well, I've seen some where you end up with 2 or 3, and that's too few. It's too hard to manage your log file if you have 2 or 3 of them. Generally, kind of anywhere in like the 20 to 150 range is usually pretty good for the number of virtual log files. If you end up going beyond that, our check is usually threshold is about 250. But honestly, if you're at 300, it's not the end of the world. But if your numbers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, well, that can cause problems. Example was working on a database that had just over 100,000 VLFs in their log file, or 100,000 virtual log files. And in order to restore that database, it took over 8 hours to restore that database. We took the same database, shrunk the log file down, expanded it back out, and got it set to the point that was the same size it started with, but it had less than 250 virtual log files. We then took that same database, backed it up, and restored it, and the restore was under 2 hours rather than over 8 hours that it originally took, all because of how those virtual log files have to get allocated when your database is being restored. So our recommendation is keep those virtual log files low, keep them around the 20 or 30 to maybe 150 range, and just keep them from getting out of control in order to get the best performance out of your SQL Server. If you need help with this or anything else related to SQL Server, you can reach out to us. I'm Steve at Stedman Solutions. You can visit our website at stedmansolutions.com.